What's going on, folks? Let's get back to some original content poetry trolling. OC trolling is the way this channel really built itself. And let's go back to the foundation and lay some stuff down. Here we got X Card King with When the Land Votes and No One Listens, how you are helping kill women in Montana. Okay, apathy is what happens when every resentment sees a red state and thinks the land doesn't vote, it's us. And leaves those of us who left standing stuck with the hicks that you think we are, with nothing left to hold on to. So you can see how this sentence is ending with the split infinitive here. You can see this when every resentment, this resentment is being personified into some type of noun, some type of person. The grammar here doesn't make that much sense. The fact that it's written in lineated with lines broken into stanzas is completely and totally arbitrary. There's really no reason for this to be not written in prose and then to be revised for clarity until it makes sense. I can't see any reason why to put this as a poem. I think this poem is doing, to a certain extent, exactly what it tells us not to do, which is it's not speaking to people in Montana. I think that this poem, due to its aggressive opening and the way that that's written in this kind of extremely kind of sentence stuck in a grammar stuck in a blender type of way, is only going to appeal to people who are really determined poetry insiders. This is really kind of an experimental piece. It's not going to appeal to people in Montana. People in Montana, were they to want a poem, if they did at all, I would assume that they would want a poem that has more conventional elements to it. Not to judge all Montanians with a single broad brush, but we could just say, if this were prose and were stated eloquently and simply and directly in an essay form, certainly more Montanians would be open to receiving that. So it's kind of, again, it's complicit in the very thing that this poem says we shouldn't do. That's a big problem. Poetry as a tool can address these types of issues, and can help us bring dignity to people who have no political power or politically overlooked, and it can, over the long haul, change the game and raise awareness. But it's not an instantaneous fix. It's not the same as recording a TikTok video, right? I mean, a really, really great poem can change history very slowly. And to understand how to do that, we need look no further than the Irish, who have a great tradition of using poetry to raise national consciousness and make a statement about how Ireland was treated by English rule. And in terms of women in poetry advocating for women's bodies and women's voices, you can't get any better than the late, great Evan Boland. So, I mean, look at the specificity of this, A Woman Without a Country. This is a very provocative title, and I think it speaks the alienation that the X Card King wanted to speak about. Look at how specific this is, how it situates the reader so effectively. As dawn breaks, he enters a room with the odor of acid. Feel that acid already on you, right? He lays the copper plate on the table, so he's going to do an engraving, right? And reaches for the shaft of the burn. Dublin wakes to horses and rain. So further situating the reader. We know this historical poem is not taking place right now. Street hawkers call. All the news is famine and famine. Okay? So a lot of people dying. The flat graver, the round graver, the angle tint tool wait for him. He bends to his work and begins. He starts with the head, cutting in the line of the cheek, finding the slope of the skull, and sizing the shape of a face that becomes a foundry of shadows, rendering with deeper cuts into copper the whole woman as a skeleton. So this person is not an embalmer, and they're not a mortician. They're making an engraving of this person for some type of official record, I would suppose. But their actions are akin to that, right? The rags of her skirt, her wrist in a bony line forever severing her body from its native air until she is ready for the page, for the street vendor, for a new inventory which now to loss and laissez-faire, so that's the English practice of not helping the starving people of Ireland during this potato famine, adds the odor of acid and the little pitiless tragedy of being imagined. Oh God, that's devastating. He puts his tools away one by one, lays them out carefully on the deal table, his work done. It's clearly a newspaper man of some sort. He's employed by the newspaper to draw a portrait of this dead woman, nameless presumably until this brief record showing the effects of famine in Dublin. Again, razor-like specificity from the world champion Evan Boland here. Because it's so focused and so evocative, it speaks to hundreds of thousands of others. It speaks universally by being specific. It's ennobling. It's beautiful. It's courageous. It's all the things that a poem can give us. And Evan Boland made the dignity of women her personal project over a lifetime of dedication. Can't be done in a day. What can I say? Besides get back to work, right? Okay. Let's look at external secret. Uncoupling. We sleep with our heads turned away from each other, mind facing the window pane steeped in gray winter sky. Gazing into a horizon of nothingness, his immersed in a window of opportunities, unraveling on his phone. Okay, so I think this is going to be one of these phone poems. And I think when we are going to do one of these phone poems, we really need to consider how much of the phone we want to show, if anything of it. Are we going to be able to treat that effectively? So this poem is going to give us a lot of phone. His immersed in a window of opportunities, unraveling on his phone, tabs slicing into new tabs as tidbits of stocks, jobs, and real estate clutter his phone with dizzying speed, unmoored, much like the thought ribbons inside my head. So I think this is an interesting part of the poem. This part could go way, way up, to that beginning. If you move this idea up to the beloved, the person who is sharing the bed with you, you're looking over at them, and instead of them looking back at you, they're gazing into their phone, and you compare your thoughts as ribbons to the quote-unquote thoughts that are occurring in the phone. It's an interesting kind of dynamic. It's an interesting proposal for the poem to explore, but it doesn't. It never explores this idea. Instead, it pivots to something else. Every few minutes, the silence is ruptured by excited realization, but this is boring. I mean, we're just continuing to narrate here. So I would open with this idea and cut most of this, cut a lot of this. Do we care that they're turned away from each other? If they're turned away from each other, how can you see their phone? It doesn't even make any sense. Unless you're seeing a reflection of the phone on the window pane, but it doesn't say that. Is this an omniscient speaker who can see two people at the same time? If so, that needs to be clarified. I am an omniscient speaker. I can see everything. So there's just some unforced errors. There's too much exposition. Get to the proposal of the poem immediately. and start sticking that in. If we're going to talk about kind of what's on people's phones and how distracted we all are as a society right now, again, we need to understand people might be encountering this poem on OCPoetry on their phone, or if it goes to a journal and that journal is online, people again might be encountering it on their phone. They might want an escape from that, especially were they to get it in print, right? In a book, if you get yourself printed in a book of poetry, maybe they want an escape from their world of the phone. So we need to handle these things delicately to give people kind of a way to engage with your meaning and content that provides depth and a genuine interest in literary life. I'm not saying every poem has to be about two professors going through a divorce or something like that. That's not literary life. That's tedium as well. But perhaps showing us a world of deeper literary resonance might be something readers have an appetite for if they're bothering to engage with your work. And if you want to show content about phones, there's already other mediums that really do that better. There's a tremendous number of things we can do with phones. TikTok is pretty much custom made for that. Okay. Let's look at You Can't Touch This. All right. Under the anesthetic, a scalpel gowns. Under the anesthetic, a scalpel gowns? What? Is that gowns a verb now? And gloves crawl under my skin. Maybe there's just a miss, comma. I don't know. I dream under the canopy. The canopy of what? I guess the surgery canopy? Is that true? A hatchet? Is there a hatchet in most surgeries? A scream run through me? Is this written by a computer? How do you make this type of error? I'm confused. Taking with them my breath, a bundle of nerves dictate every move. So there's the singular and plural agreement problems that plague this poem. Something carved out, flesh splints, a chunk. I am aware. What? So again, this poem's disinterest in grammar bothers me a little bit. I mean, if that's design, if that's a calculated effect, great. But why? Is it because you're under anesthesia that you can't speak English or you can't remember English? Is English not your first language then? If so, maybe we need to know that. A track of stitches at my throat, remnants of some tampering. But why? I mean, is this a dream? Is this reality? Is this just like random images you had while you were under anesthesia? Is this a metaphor for something else? Got to let the reader in some of this. You don't have to let the reader into everything, but the reader still has to have some motivation to want to read this besides weird grammar and scalpels and hatchets. I suppose if this were like a true horror poem for the horror genre, it's not something I know that much about. But then, there's not enough tension here. There's not enough mystery. All right. So check this out, guys. Here's Emily Dickinson. It knew no medicine. Here's how to put surgery in a poem. It knew no medicine. It was not sickness, then nor any need of surgery. And therefore 'twas not pain. It moved away the cheeks, a dimple at best, and left the profile plainer. And in the place of bloom, it left the little tint that never had a name. You've seen it on a cast's face. Was paradise to blame? If momentarily ajar, temerity drew near and sickened ever afterward for somewhat that it saw. So again, this is a poem of broken, to a certain extent, broken grammar. Not as broken as Hammer Pants Man. I can't touch this. But it is a little bit broken diction. And it does have this surgical element here of kind of undoing of the face, undoing of the name. a very, very beautiful poem, though, right? I mean, you can't quite put your finger on what it's talking about, whether it's talking about the loss of a beloved to memory, or whether you're talking about a glimpse of something great that then you can't get back to, that gets taken away from you. It's talking about, who knows exactly. But you can reread this poem again and again from Emily Dickinson. You can get different takes on it. It doesn't kind of belabor the grotesque that much. I mean, it alludes to it. I mean, was written at a different time, obviously. So it kind of drives up to that, but it stops short of kind of getting overly involved with the grotesque. But it offers a lot of beauty as well. This bloom is very well timed. The tint is just absolutely stunning in here. Look at how we exit with temerity, and momentally. I'm not sure if this is accurate text. I'm going to guess that it is momentally ajar, which probably is momentarily. But this is just the first text that I pulled up. So again, if it is momentally ajar, that's interesting. Temerity drew near and sickened ever afterward for somewhat that it saw. Now I'm curious if this is, the original text, but okay. Any rate, nevertheless, a beautiful Dickinson poem. So when you go and attack this idea of surgery, you're going to need to give the reader something a little bit more than just literally describing a fantasy or a dream sequence of surgery. If that's all you do, I mean, even if this poem ends up pivoting to something else, I guess it has its own tint here. Just as Emily Dickinson had her tint, this poem ends with a tint. Even if it wants to pivot to kind of philosophize, or kind of, give us some sort of more emotional impression, it's happening way too late in this poem. Way, 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 way too late. Dickinson pivots almost immediately with her rhetoric. It knew no medicine. It was not sickness. So at the very beginning, this rhetorical, in other words, the denial is a form of rhetorical or argumentation in her poem that immediately puts the reader on edge and lets the reader know that there's going to be a pivot coming. It knew no medicine. It was not sickness then, nor any need of surgery and therefore 'twas not pain. And we get a stanza break. It moved away the cheeks. Now she starts to paint on stanza 2 and give us this emotional, more deeply emotional impact. But the action is removing, which is also interesting to the reader, I would hope. Okay. One more. We got time for one more, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do one more, okay? Rococo. Victorian house was once ours. That Victorian house was once ours. Roses leant over the front wall. I don't want to be, quote, I don't want to be your lover anymore. They whispered. So is that the roses whispering that? Like dead soldiers folded in half? Wouldn't they say, we don't want to be your lover anymore? I don't understand how a bunch of roses or a rose bush could collectively say I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird because it says they here. We are all you are all individuals. We are all individuals. It's just kind of weird. Like dead soldiers folded in half. So this dead soldiers folded in half, I have a hard time imagining that. Why are dead soldiers folded in half? Did they get run over by a tank? I mean, did they fold over for some reason? Did they fall out of a plane? I mean, it's a missed opportunity. And you're bringing up dead soldiers, which is really, really, really going to be making a huge ask on your reader to bring this military idea in, and war and death and battle. And what are you going to do with that? You're going to pivot back to the wisteria. Wisteria grew around the brickwork. Wisteria is this kind of very, compared to any other tree name you could go with, you go with the one that's kind of the most poetical and sound. As I stood there staring, so it's kind of the register here is becoming almost intensely sentimental. So we're picking up all these sentimental tropes of roses, wisteria, dead soldiers, and then we're gonna get this morning dew, sailing pearls. So it's again amplifying into this huge, playing with these hugely sentimental ideas. And if that were done on purpose with some design that then it's going to pivot to or critique or play with in some way, set that up to push against, that might be interesting. I can't really see this doing that. Residue clung despite the fires I once ignited, despite the wood and coal. We get the prayer. We got October, which is another kind of sentimentally, potentially, floorboards creaking. All this stuff is kind of Baroque and maybe a little Gothic, and really, really, really a overstatement. But what's the premise? What are we talking about? What are we getting to here? I don't know. So, if we were to peel away to a central proposal and start with, I don't want to be your lover anymore, whisper the flowers, like dead soldiers. Then what? Then what? Then where do we go? Well, I don't know what we do there, because this poem doesn't seem interested in following up on this core issue, the core proposal of flowers that don't want to be your lover anymore. Does that mean literally someone doesn't want to be your lover anymore? Because last I checked, flowers don't literally speak. So they're kind of apostrophizing. Someone is making them speak. The poem is making them speak for a reason in place of someone else or because of some feeling. And we have this kind of pathetic fallacy idea in romantic poetry. Whenever it rains, and there's rain in poetry, that's a projection of the poet's or the speaker's emotional state. We have a hard time kind of deploying the pathetic fallacy at face value in the 21st century. We can't play it straight ahead necessarily. So we're deploying a lot of different things without seeming to know why or to what end, and I think that's a big issue here. Okay. I think we had some interesting efforts, some interesting ideas. I had a really fascinating conversation with X-Card about the poem. And, I feel like sometimes people come to me and they're like, well, your job is to kind of platform and enable OCPoetry to have greater reach and to reach more people. And I don't know that my YouTube channel actually reaches as many people as OCPoetry point A and point B. Even if it reached 1 billion people, I'm not sure that's how I conceive of my job, whether I reach 1 or 1 million. It's the same job for me, which is raise the bar, raise the standards of what we're trying to do here on OCPoetry. And I think she was surprised because, I was taking the stance of quite frankly, a lot of stuff. This is some of the better poetry on OCPoetry. And most of the stuff is very, very bad. And I think she was surprised that I didn't see it as my job as a moderator to champion, and quite the opposite. I see my job is to push back against this kind of rampant populism of OCPoetry and remind people that poetry can do more, much, much more, if you invest in it. And people should aspire to improve themselves and dream big here. Work small if you want to. Work in a tight, controlled way, the way Evan Boland did. But this small aspiration of getting a few updudes here and there, I think, is very sad. And I think people should lift themselves up. And that's what I want to do. I want to collaborate with folks who have ambitions to become great poets. If that's how you want to roll, make sure you subscribe up and send me a DM. I'll look at some of your pieces. Thank you.